Welcome to 1,000 Years, 1,000 Reforms, How Education Changed China, and Vice Versa, with your host, me, Lucas Smith. China is a country with a very rich history. From the 1500s until today, China's education system can be split into 8 major categories based on time. The education system of China has been a major part of the country's development. Chinese education began during the Shang Dynasty in the 16th century BC. Students were taught the 6 arts: rites, archery, chariot riding, music, math, and history. Education's focus then shifted to Confucian works. Students were only taught enough to be able to pass the test to become an officer of the state. China thought they were the world's most advanced civilization because of the 4 inventions: gunpowder, the compass, movable type, and paper. But their defeat in the Opium War had them rethinking their superiority. Western thought had begun to take hold in China, mostly beginning from Christian missionary schools.
Most of China was suspicious of Western thought, but some progressive thinkers saw the opportunity for education reform.
Few wanted a balanced approach until the defeat in the Sino-Japanese War. Japan's schools were already pretty westernized, and China moved to mimic them. In 1911, the Qing dynasty was overthrown, and China became a republic. The school situation was very non-uniform, with Chinese, Japanese, and Western-style schools. During the May 4th period, there were many disputes about how the education system should work. In the early 1920s, China's education system was closely based on America's. In 1921, after the Russian Revolution, the Chinese Communist Party was created.
And so, China had a lot of issues that needed to be covered in the education system. It had to be traditional and technical, and it had to spread through the rural Chinese society.
Chairman Mao created a university that would bring education to poor rural areas.
But in 1930, Japan invaded, and education was put on hold until the 1949 liberation. The Soviet education model was adopted quickly after liberation, with little care for the Chinese way of life. The Soviet Union was now seen as the pinnacle of technological achievement. But their school system did little for China's mass illiteracy. In fact, in 1956, less than half of primary-age students were in school. The communist focus was on revamping higher education. They opened many trade schools focused on specific occupations. Control of the comprehensive universities was handed over to the Ministry of Higher Education. However, this system did not work.
Between Chairman Mao's failed Great Leap Forward, natural disasters, and weakening relations with the USSR, these systems of education never fully developed.
When this Soviet model was disbanded, previous attempts at balance between Confucian and Western thought were implemented once again. Chairman Mao's walking on 2 legs system involved both vocational schools and traditional comprehensive universities.
The 2-tiered system was considered elitist because most people had to do the first-track vocational training.
People blamed this on administrators, and the Cultural Revolution was born. The Cultural Revolution spread across China. Work teams were created to control and contain the revolutionaries. However, Chairman Mao thought this was a bad idea and removed the teams. This only caused a larger revolt. In 1966, the communists decided China needed education reform one more time.
During the next 3 years, uneducated people controlled the universities. Sometimes there were no classes at all.
However, most primary schools were unaffected. The primary and secondary programs were shortened by a few years, and education was now entirely technical, focused on industrial techniques.
Well, the communists cut all the classes: history, literature, physics, and geography.
In 1966, colleges stopped using their entrance exams. However, few students were accepted until the early 70s. At this time, educational policies were similar to those of the 60s. The point of the reform was to realize the 4 modernizations: agriculture, industry, national defense, and science and technology. But also to stick with the 4 cardinal principles: the socialist road, the People's Democratic Dictatorship, the Chinese Communist Party, and Marxist, Leninist, Maoist thought.
And so, academic standards were reintroduced across the board, and an emphasis was placed on educational quality rather than quantity.
There were now 6 years primary, 3 years junior secondary, and 3 years senior secondary schooling.
And so, specialized schools were reintroduced for the best students, as well as vocational schools.
Many rural primary schools closed, and elementary enrollment actually went down. Because of agricultural decollectivization, there was more incentive to have kids work on farms than go to school. At first, vocational schools' reception was poor, but by 1904, 56% of senior secondary students were in vocational schools. After the Cultural Revolution, the biggest change in higher education was 1977's reintroduction of college entrance exams. In 1985, a decree was passed called the Decision of the Reform of the Education System.
The decision was mainly based on two documents from the 1960s. The Decision on Unifying Management in the Higher Education System and the 60 Articles of Higher Education.
Once again, the higher education was based on the 1950s Soviet models. There were still very few class choices in college, but the curriculum is still broadening today. The colleges have become a lot less important in career assignment, and they're becoming a lot more Americanized. In 1995, the National People's Congress passed the Educational Law of the People's Republic of China. This made many older practices into law, such as the 1985 reform. As China becomes more and more of a global citizen, its educational system is only becoming more important. And now for a look at what might be the future of Chinese education. A recent clip from the popular Dino Herndon show.
And welcome to the Dino Herndon show. Tonight we have with us a very, very special guest, Principal Liu, who's from China. He's going to make a brand new kind of school that will hopefully become the model of Chinese education in the future.
Thank you for having me here, Dino.
Now, well, I understand that your school is a very unique idea. Can you tell us a little more about it?
Sure. What we're trying to do at this school is we're trying to merge, like, the traditional Chinese education with a more modern, Western, sort of like the global perspective, sort of a little more Western. So we're trying to sort of bring the two together and interwork them in a way that's more interactive than most schools also. Like we're going to have our classes sort of set up as more than just instruction and like hard, rigid, standardized and stuff like that. It's going to be more of a discussion-based thing between the teacher and the students and the other students. We're also going to try to bring a little bit of our Chinese Confucian past in with what we're going to call ethics classes, which are not going to be specifically like a doctrine of this is ethical, this isn't ethical, you should do this, you shouldn't do this.
Okay.
But more sort of talking about that and how some of the Confucian things, how and other older philosophies and stuff, and new philosophies, how they apply and where they might not apply and things like that. Just sort of discussing, and I think that because individually the students could make better decisions and they'll know why, rather than just being pounded into them. And also with our melding of the old and the new, traditional and the modern, our architecture for the building. It's a merge of traditional
and actually,
modern.
yes, we have our internationally renowned architect, Diego Houston, talking to our man on the street, Dennis Crutchin, right now. Dennis?
Thanks, Dino. I'm here with architect Diego Houston, who's in charge of this school project.
This project was really interesting. Just a completely new experience for school.
So, what is it that sets this school apart architecturally?
Well, since this school's going to be an entirely new experience, just very unique, we decided, in contrast to that, to traditionalize the architecture. Just to make it more just traditional Chinese with large, light-filmed rooms, which are very good for discussion. And also inner courtyards, which just maximize the school experience.
And behind us right now, Dino, you can see the construction that's already taking place on this school. In China, I'm Dennis Crutchin. Back to you.
Thank you. Principal Liu, it looks like you have a very interesting project that you're working on. And I wish you the best of luck in your endeavor. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me on the show as well.
All right. The Dino Herndon Show is coming right back after this break, so make sure you stay tuned.
'Cause if I'm the man that you